Homeless at 68, she bought a $1 cottage. Her dog refused to leave the hearth until she uncovered why. The wind moved through the broken roof like a quiet warning. Evelyn stepped inside the stone cottage, her boots scraping against cold, uneven floors. It smelled like dust and time. Behind her, Koda stopped at the doorway, refusing to follow. Then slowly, he turned toward the hearth and wouldn't leave it. If you were in her place, would you stay or turn around while you still could? The porch light went out without warning. 1 second, it was there, casting a pale yellow circle across the front steps, catching the edge of Evelyn Carter's suitcase. The next, it clicked off, just like that. No hesitation, no flicker, as if someone inside had reached for the switch and made a decision they didn't want to take back. Evelyn didn't turn around. She stood on the sidewalk, the cool concrete pressing through the thin soles of her shoes. Her hand rested on the handle of a worn brown suitcase, the kind that still had a zipper that stuck if you pulled it too fast. In her other hand, a plastic grocery bag stretched slightly at the seams, filled with things that didn't quite belong together. 2 sweaters, a half-full bottle of aspirin, a framed photograph she hadn't had time to wrap. The house behind her was quiet now. No voices, no footsteps, no shadow moving behind the curtains. Just stillness. Koda pressed against her leg. The German Shepherd didn't whine or bark. He didn't pull toward the door or scratch at it. He simply stood there, close enough that Evelyn could feel the steady warmth of his body through the fabric of her coat. His ears were forward, alert, watching the house. Waiting. For what? She wasn't sure. A car passed at the end of the street, its headlights sweeping briefly across the row of identical suburban homes. Clean driveways, trimmed hedges, porch decorations left over from last season. It moved on without slowing, the sound of its engine fading into the distance. Evelyn tightened her grip on the suitcase. It felt heavier than it should have, not because of what was inside, but because of what wasn't. She glanced once at the front door. It was closed, locked, the porch light off. No sign that anyone had just stood there minutes ago watching her leave. There had been no argument. That was the strange part. No raised voices, no slammed doors, no final explosion that might have made sense of things. Just a conversation that had ended too quietly. Her daughter had stood in the kitchen, arms folded, eyes tired in a way Evelyn didn't recognize. Words had been said, careful, measured words, about space, about timing, about how things weren't working. Evelyn had listened. She had nodded once. And then, somehow, it was over. The suitcase had already been by the door. That part stayed with her. She hadn't packed it herself. A faint breeze moved down the street, carrying the dry scent of fallen leaves and something distant. Someone burning wood, maybe. It brushed against Evelyn's face, cool and steady, like the night was settling in around her without asking permission. Koda shifted beside her. Not restless, just adjusting his stance, leaning a little more firmly against her leg. Evelyn reached down without thinking and rested her hand on the top of his head. His fur was thick, slightly rough beneath her fingers. Familiar. Real. He exhaled softly, a slow breath that seemed to steady something in her chest. She didn't realize how long she had been standing there until another car passed, then another, each one the same. Lights, motion, gone. No one stopped, no one asked. The street continued as if nothing had happened. Evelyn lifted the suitcase. The wheels rattled slightly as she set it upright. One of them didn't roll quite right. It dragged just a little, catching on small cracks in the sidewalk. She didn't try to fix it. Instead, she took one step forward, then another. The sound of the suitcase followed her, a soft, uneven rhythm against the pavement. Koda moved with her immediately, staying close at her side, his body angled just enough to brush against her leg every few steps, not pulling ahead, not lagging behind. Just there. They reached the corner of the street. Evelyn paused for a moment, not because she didn't know which way to go, but because it felt like something should happen here. Something final. Something that marked the moment. But nothing did. No voice called her name. No door opened behind her. The house remained still. Silent. Distant already, even though it was only half a block away. Evelyn looked down the empty road ahead. Streetlights stretched in a long, quiet line. Pools of light separated by darkness. The kind of road you could walk for a long time without seeing another person. She adjusted her grip on the suitcase. The plastic bag rustled softly in her other hand. Koda glanced up at her once, his eyes catching the light for just a second. Then he looked forward again. Ready. Evelyn took a breath. It came in shallow at first, then steadier. She didn't feel anger. That surprised her. She didn't feel panic either. Just a kind of stillness. Like everything inside her had gone quiet all at once, leaving only the sound of her own footsteps and the soft drag of the suitcase behind her. She stepped off the curb and crossed the street. The night stretched out ahead, open and uncertain, and without looking back, Evelyn Carter kept walking. The sound of the suitcase followed her for a while. Then it stopped. One of the wheels gave out somewhere near the second block. It twisted sideways and locked in place, forcing the case to drag hard against the pavement. Evelyn didn't curse. She didn't even sigh. She just lifted it slightly and kept moving, the weight pulling at her shoulder now instead of trailing behind. Koda stayed close. Every few steps, he glanced back, not toward the road ahead, but toward the house they had left behind. His ears would twitch, then settle again. Eventually, even he stopped looking. By the time they reached the edge of the neighborhood, the houses thinned out. Streetlights grew farther apart. The sidewalks cracked into uneven pieces, some swallowed by weeds pushing up through the concrete. Evelyn slowed. She hadn't decided where she was going. That realization came quietly, like everything else that night. No panic, no rush. Just a simple fact settling into place. She stopped at a bus bench outside a closed pharmacy. The metal seat was cold. She lowered herself onto it carefully, setting the suitcase beside her. The plastic bag slipped from her hand and rested at her feet. Koda sat in front of her, facing the street. Watching. A soft hum came from somewhere nearby. An electrical box maybe, or a distant generator. The air had cooled further, carrying the faint smell of asphalt and damp leaves. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on her knees. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Not to sleep, just to pause. When she opened them again, nothing had changed. A car passed, then another. No one looked at her. That was the first time she noticed it. Not just that no one stopped, but that no one really saw her at all. Their eyes moved over her the way they might probably over a mailbox or a signpost. Something present, but not important enough to register. Evelyn sat there for a long time. Long enough for the night to shift into something deeper. The kind of quiet that comes after most people have already gone inside, when the streets belong to the few who have nowhere else to be. Eventually, she stood again. She picked up the suitcase, adjusted her grip on the plastic bag, and continued walking. The church basement smelled like detergent and old wood. It wasn't hard to find. Someone had mentioned it once, months ago, in passing. A place that opened its doors at night. No questions. No paperwork. Just space. Evelyn hesitated at the entrance. The door was propped open with a brick. Warm light spilled out onto the steps, along with the low murmur of voices. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just present. Koda stepped forward first. He moved slowly, head low, scanning the doorway before crossing the threshold. Only when he was inside did Evelyn follow. The room was larger than she expected. Rows of folding cots lined the walls. A few people sat at long tables, eating quietly from paper plates. Others lay down already, wrapped in blankets that didn't quite match. A woman near the entrance looked up. She smiled. Not wide, just enough. "You here for the night?" Evelyn nodded once. The woman didn't ask anything else. She simply pointed toward an empty cot near the far wall. "Blankets are over there. Coffee's still warm if you want it." Evelyn murmured a thank you, though she wasn't sure if the woman heard it. She moved carefully through the room, aware of the way people glanced up briefly as she passed. Quick looks, then back down again. Not curious, not unkind, just acknowledging. Koda stayed close to her leg, his body brushing against her every few steps. When they reached the cot, Evelyn set the suitcase down beside it. The thin mattress dipped slightly as she sat. It wasn't comfortable, but it was inside. She reached for one of the folded blankets and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled faintly of soap and something older beneath it, fabric that had been used many times before. Koda circled once at her feet before settling down, but he didn't relax. His head stayed up, ears forward, eyes moving, watching doors, watching people, watching everything. Evelyn noticed. She reached down, resting her hand lightly on his back. "It's all right," she whispered. He didn't lie down fully. Not yet. The routine formed quickly. Days blurred into each other in ways Evelyn hadn't expected. Mornings meant leaving the basement before it closed. Afternoons were spent moving from one place to another. Public library, park benches, anywhere with a place to sit without being asked questions. Evenings brought her back to the church. Same smell, same cots, same quiet rhythm of people arriving, settling, disappearing again by morning. She learned where to stand in line without being in the way, learned how to keep her belongings close, learned how to move without drawing attention. Koda adapted too. He never wandered, never begged. When food was offered, he would look at Evelyn first. Wait. Only eat after she had taken something for herself. Sometimes, if she hesitated, he wouldn't eat at all. Evelyn tried not to notice. But she did. One afternoon, sitting in the library, she caught her reflection in the darkened computer screen. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in the way she held herself. Shoulders slightly drawn in, movements more careful, eyes lowering before meeting anyone else's. Like she was learning to take up less space. Across the room, people typed, read, whispered. No one looked at her. Koda lay beside her chair, his body stretched out, but his head still raised. Every time someone walked past, his eyes followed them, not aggressive, not tense, just aware. Present. Evelyn reached down, her fingers brushing the side of his neck. "You still see me," she said softly. His tail gave a small, slow movement against the floor. That was enough. Nights grew colder. The blanket wasn't always enough. Sometimes Evelyn would wake to the sound of someone coughing or shifting in their sleep, or the soft creak of the building settling around them. And sometimes she would wake to nothing at all. Just silence. On those nights, she would lie there, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting on Koda's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Counting it 1, 2, 3. Proof that something in her world was still steady, still real. And in that quiet, without saying it out loud, Evelyn Carter began to understand something she hadn't noticed at first. She hadn't just left her home. She had stepped into a place where people existed on the edges. Seen when necessary, ignored the rest of the time. A place where life continued around you, without ever quite touching you. She didn't fight it. She didn't question it. She simply adjusted. And each day, a little more of her learned how to move through the world without being seen at all. The library became her place, not because it was comfortable, but because it didn't ask anything from her. The building sat between a dentist's office and a shuttered laundromat, its windows tall but slightly fogged from age. Inside, the air always carried the same quiet mix of paper, dust, and the faint hum of computers running longer than they should. Evelyn arrived early most mornings. She would take the same chair near the back row, close enough to an outlet for the public computers but far enough from the front desk to avoid conversation. The chair creaked when she sat, the plastic worn smooth from years of use. Koda lay at her feet, stretched along the narrow space beneath the desk. He never slept fully. Even when his eyes closed, his ears stayed alert. Evelyn logged onto one of the computers slowly, careful with the keys. The screen flickered once before settling into the same homepage she had seen every day that week. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for. Work, maybe, or something that resembled direction. She clicked through listings, part-time jobs, temporary housing, shared rooms with strict rules and stricter prices. Most required deposits, references, stability. Things she no longer had. She moved through them without reacting. Just reading. Just scrolling. Every now and then she would pause, hover the mouse over something that seemed possible, then move on. Koda shifted slightly beneath the desk, not restless, just aware. Around her, the library moved at its usual pace, pages turning, a cough in the corner, the quiet beep of a scanner near the front desk. Life continuing in small, contained ways. Evelyn reached the bottom of another page and clicked next. The listings refreshed. More of the same, then something different. It wasn't larger, or brighter, or even particularly noticeable. Just different. She leaned forward slightly. The title read, Stone Cottage, Rural Restoration Program. No images at first glance, just a block of text. She clicked. The page loaded slowly. A single photograph appeared at the top. The cottage stood alone in the frame. Stone walls, darkened with age, the roof sagging in the center. Grass grown high around it, almost swallowing the path that led to the door. It didn't look inviting. It didn't look safe. It looked forgotten. Evelyn kept reading. Location, Southern Kentucky, remote valley area. Condition, structural damage, no utilities. Access, limited. Final approach on foot. Her eyes moved down the page. Price, $1. She blinked once. Read it again. $1. Below it, a longer paragraph explained the terms. The property was part of a county program, an attempt to preserve abandoned land. Buyers were required to occupy and restore the structure within a set number of years. No electricity, no plumbing, no guarantee the building could be salvaged at all. Evelyn leaned back slightly. The chair creaked beneath her. $1. It didn't make sense. Her first instinct was to close the page. Listings like that weren't meant for people like her. They were for investors, for people with tools, time, money, not someone carrying everything she owned in a suitcase that no longer rolled properly. She moved the cursor toward the corner of the screen. Koda shifted. His head lifted from the floor, eyes moving up toward her. Not urgent, just watching. Evelyn paused. Her hand hovered over the mouse. She glanced down at him. "What is it?" she murmured softly. Koda didn't respond the way he usually did. No small movement of his tail, no settling back down. He stayed still, focused. Then his gaze moved, just slightly, back toward the screen. Evelyn followed it. The photograph of the cottage sat there, unchanged. Still. Silent. She leaned forward again. This time she scrolled slower, reading every word. The description repeated itself in different ways. Isolated, unmaintained. Risk. No one wanted it. That much was clear. A place no one had chosen. Evelyn felt something shift. Not hope, not exactly, but something close to it. Or maybe just space. A place that didn't expect anything from her. No rent, no paperwork, no questions. She looked at the photograph again. Tried to imagine it. The silence. The distance from everything. The absence of people who might turn away. Koda let out a soft breath. Evelyn reached down and rested her hand against his neck. "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" she said quietly. He blinked once. That was all. Evelyn sat there for a long moment. The noise of the library faded around her. The listings she had been scrolling through all week, gone. Just the cottage now, and the simple fact sitting in front of her. $1. She checked her pocket. A few folded bills. Not much. Enough. Her fingers tightened slightly around them. Evelyn looked back at the screen. Then, slowly, she reached for the printer icon. The machine near the front desk whirred to life, the sound cutting softly through the quiet room. A single page slid out. She stood, picking it up without drawing attention. The paper felt thin in her hands. Fragile. Real. She folded it carefully and placed it inside the plastic bag with her things. When she returned to her seat, Koda had already settled back down, but not fully. His eyes remained open. Watching her. Evelyn sat again. The computer screen dimmed in front of her. She didn't open another listing, didn't search anything else. She just sat there, hands resting lightly in her lap, feeling the weight of the folded paper nearby. She didn't understand why. Didn't try to explain it. But for the first time in days, maybe longer, she wasn't just moving from place to place. She was considering something. And that, by itself, was new. The decision didn't come all at once. It settled in quietly over the next 2 days, the way cold does when it seeps through a coat you thought was thick enough. Not sharp, not sudden, just steady until you realized it had already taken hold. Evelyn returned to the library the following morning. Same chair, same computer. The listing was still there, unchanged. No new photos, no updates, no signs that anyone else had noticed it. She read it again. Slower this time. The words didn't feel as distant as they had before. They felt closer, like they were describing something that might actually exist, somewhere beyond the walls of the library. Koda stayed at her feet, quieter than usual. When she printed the page again, just in case the first copy was lost, he didn't react, but his ears tilted forward slightly, catching the soft whir of the machine. That afternoon, Evelyn spoke to someone for the first time in days. Not much. Just enough. At the front desk, she asked about bus routes. The woman behind the counter, middle-aged, tired eyes, reading glasses resting low on her nose, pulled up a map. "Kentucky?" she said, glancing at the screen. "That's a long ride." Evelyn nodded once. "I don't mind." The woman studied her for a moment, then turned the screen slightly, pointing out transfers, stops, and the final stretch where public routes stopped altogether. "You'll need to walk the last part," she said, "or find someone willing to take you." Evelyn didn't respond right away. She just looked at the map. Lines crossing over each other. Cities she didn't know. Roads leading into places that had no names marked clearly. Then she said, "I can walk." The woman hesitated, then printed out the route. Evelyn thanked her. That was all. The next morning, she left the church earlier than usual. The suitcase was lighter, not because she had more, but because she had less. She had gone through everything the night before, sitting on the edge of the cot while others settled in around her. One by one, she had removed items she couldn't carry. Extra clothes, old papers, things that belonged to a life she wasn't returning to. She didn't throw them away. She left them folded neatly at the end of the cot. Someone would find them. Someone who needed them more than she did now. Koda watched the entire time, silent. When she finished, he moved closer, pressing his head gently against her arm. Evelyn rested her hand there for a moment. Then she stood. The bus station smelled like diesel and stale coffee. It wasn't crowded. A few people scattered across plastic seats, their bags tucked close, their eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Evelyn stood near the ticket counter, the folded route map in her hand. When it was her turn, she stepped forward. "One way," she said. The man behind the counter didn't ask questions. He typed something into the computer, printed the ticket, and slid it across. "That'll get you as far as the last stop," he said. "After that, you're on your own." Evelyn nodded. "I understand." She paid. The money in her pocket felt thinner now, but not empty. Not yet. The ride was long. Hours folded into each other. The bus moved through cities, then towns, then stretches of road where the buildings grew farther apart, replaced by trees and open land. Evelyn sat by the window. Koda lay at her feet, still as ever, though his eyes never fully closed. At each stop, new people boarded. Others left. No one spoke to her. No one needed to. She watched the landscape change. Concrete giving way to dirt. Glass buildings fading into wooden structures. The sky widening overhead. At one point, she caught her reflection in the window again. This time, it looked different. Not smaller. Just farther away. Like the person she had been was already behind her. By the time the bus reached its final stop, the sun had begun to lower. The air outside was cooler. Cleaner. The driver opened the door and glanced back. "This is as far as it goes." Evelyn stood. Her legs felt stiff as she stepped down onto the gravel. The bus pulled away soon after, the sound of its engine fading quickly into the distance. and then silence. Not the kind she had known in the city. This was different. Deeper. The kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but full of things you couldn't see. Evelyn adjusted her grip on the suitcase. The road ahead was narrow, unmarked, just a strip of dirt cutting through tall grass and scattered trees. She looked at the map once, then folded it and put it away. There was only one direction now. Forward. Koda stepped ahead this time, not far, just enough to lead by a pace or two. His body moved differently here. More alert. More certain. Evelyn followed. The ground shifted beneath her feet as the road began to fade. Dirt turned to grass. Grass to uneven earth. The path grew thinner, less defined, until it was little more than a suggestion through the landscape. The air carried a faint scent, wild mint maybe, mixed with damp soil and something older beneath it. Time. That was what it smelled like. Time left alone. They walked in silence. No cars, no voices, just the sound of her steps and the soft movement of Koda ahead. After a while, the land began to open. Rolling hills stretched out in every direction, their edges softened by distance and light. And there, set against the slope of one of those hills, the cottage. Evelyn stopped. It was smaller than it had looked in the photograph, more worn. The stone walls still stood, but the roof sagged noticeably in the center. Parts of it had collapsed entirely, leaving dark gaps where sky showed through. The grass around it had grown wild, untouched. As if the land itself had decided to reclaim what was left, Evelyn stood there for a long moment, taking it in. The silence pressed in around her, not threatening, just present. Koda slowed beside her, then stopped. He didn't move forward, didn't approach the cottage. He stood still, his body angled slightly, ears forward, eyes fixed on the structure ahead. Evelyn noticed. She looked down at him. "What is it?" she asked quietly. He didn't respond, just stood there, watching. Evelyn turned back toward the cottage. The wind moved lightly through the grass, brushing against her coat. The path ahead was clear. Only a few more steps. She lifted the suitcase again, took one step forward, then another. Koda stayed where he was, for a moment. Then, slowly, he followed, but not as close as before, not pressing against her leg, not guiding, just watching. Evelyn reached the door. It hung slightly open, one hinge loose, the wood weathered and gray. She placed her hand against it. The surface was rough beneath her fingers. Cold. Real. She pushed. The door creaked inward. Darkness waited inside. Evelyn stood at the threshold. The air that drifted out was cooler, carrying the faint smell of stone, dust, and something that had been closed away for a very long time. Behind her, Koda did not step forward. Not yet. Evelyn didn't turn around. She just stood there, one hand still on the door, looking into the space beyond. And for the first time since she had printed that listing, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not exactly, but something close to it, something quiet, something waiting. Evelyn stepped inside. The floor was uneven beneath her feet, stone, worn smooth in some places and broken in others. Dust shifted with each step, rising faintly in the air before settling again. The light from the doorway stretched across the interior, just enough to reveal shapes without fully defining them. One room. That was all. A single open space, long and narrow, with walls made of stacked stone that held their place better than anything else in the structure. The roof above sagged, wooden beams exposed where sections had given way. Through one of the gaps, a pale strip of sky showed through, slowly darkening as evening settled. Evelyn didn't move far. She stood just inside the doorway, letting her eyes adjust. The smell was stronger in here. Old stone, damp wood, something faintly metallic underneath, like rust or long-settled ash. Her suitcase rested against her leg. Behind her, Koda remained at the threshold. He hadn't stepped in. Evelyn glanced back. He stood rigid, just outside the doorway, ears forward, body still. Not afraid, but cautious in a way she hadn't seen before. "It's all right," she said quietly. Her voice sounded different in the space, softer, absorbed by the walls. Koda didn't move. Evelyn waited a moment, then turned forward again. If he needed time, she would give it. She stepped further into the room. Her foot caught slightly on a loose stone, forcing her to steady herself against the wall. The surface was cold beneath her palm, solid in a way the rest of the cottage wasn't. She moved slowly, taking in what remained. An old iron frame leaned against one wall, maybe part of a bed, long since stripped of anything soft. A wooden table, broken across the middle, lay tilted near the far side. Fragments of glass glittered faintly in the corners, remnants of windows that no longer existed. And then, the hearth. It took up nearly the entire far wall. Built from larger stones darker than the rest, it stood solid and unmoved, as if time had passed around it without ever touching it. The opening was wide enough to step into, blackened from years of use. Above it, a thick wooden beam ran across the width, scarred but intact. Evelyn approached it slowly. The air felt different here. Cooler still. She set the suitcase down beside her and crouched slightly, brushing her hand across the stone surface near the base. Dust came away on her fingers. Beneath it, the stone felt smooth, worn. Behind her, there was a shift, a soft movement of claws against stone. Koda. Evelyn didn't turn. She listened. One step, then another. Slow, careful. He entered the cottage, but he didn't come to her. Instead, he stopped halfway across the room, his body angled toward the hearth, watching. Evelyn straightened. The last of the daylight faded from the doorway, leaving the interior dim, shadows stretching deeper into the corners. She needed light and warmth. She stepped outside again, scanning the ground near the cottage. Fallen branches lay scattered among the grass, dry enough to burn if she could manage it. She gathered what she could carry, returned inside. The process was slow, clumsy. She hadn't built a fire like this in years, not without tools, not without a proper structure to guide it. But eventually, a small flame caught. Then another. The fire settled into the hearth, low and uneven, but alive. The light flickered against the stone walls, shifting shadows across the room. The space felt less empty now, still worn, still broken, but no longer completely cold. Evelyn sat down on the floor near the fire. The warmth reached her slowly, seeping through the fabric of her coat, into her hands, her knees. She exhaled. For the first time since arriving, her shoulders lowered. Behind her, Koda moved again. He circled once, twice, then stopped near the hearth, not beside her, not at her feet, but close to the base of the stone. His nose lowered. He sniffed. Once, twice. Then he let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a growl. Something in between. Evelyn turned. "What is it?" Koda didn't look at her. His attention stayed fixed on the stone at the base of the hearth. He stepped closer, pressed his nose against it, then pulled back slightly, as if unsure. The fire crackled softly. The sound echoed faintly in the room. Evelyn watched him for a moment, then shook her head slightly. "New place," she murmured. "Smells different, that's all." She turned back toward the fire, tried to settle, tried to let her body rest. But Koda didn't move away. He stayed there, watching. After a while, Evelyn spread one of her blankets on the floor. It wasn't much, just enough to separate her from the cold stone. She lay down carefully, pulling the other blanket over herself. The fire burned low but steady. The light softened. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the broken roof and slipping through the gaps in the walls. It carried sounds with it, distant branches, shifting grass, something moving far beyond the reach of sight. Evelyn closed her eyes. Her body was tired enough to sleep, but her mind lingered. On the house. On the silence. On the way Koda hadn't wanted to come inside. She opened her eyes again, just slightly. Koda was still awake, still near the hearth. His body tense, ears forward, eyes fixed on the same place. Then, he let out a low growl. Soft, controlled, but unmistakable. Evelyn pushed herself up slightly. Koda. He didn't stop. The growl faded, but his posture remained. Alert. Focused. Evelyn sat there for a moment, listening. Waiting. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. The fire crackled. The wind shifted. That was all. Eventually, she lay back down, pulled the blanket closer. "It's nothing," she said quietly. "Just the house settling." But the words didn't settle anything. Not really. Because even as her eyes began to close again, even as her breathing slowed, she could still feel it. Not in a way she could explain. Not in a way she could name. Just something about the hearth. Something about the way Koda watched it. Something that didn't quite belong to the rest of the room. The fire burned lower. The shadows deepened. And sometime in the night, Evelyn Carter fell asleep. While just a few feet away, Koda remained awake. Watching. Listening, waiting. That was how the night passed for him. And somehow, without realizing it, that was how it began for Evelyn too. Morning came slowly. Not with sunlight, at least not at first, but with a shift in the air. The cold softened just enough. The wind settled into something quieter. The fire in the hearth had burned down to faint embers, glowing low beneath a thin layer of ash. Evelyn opened her eyes. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the stone ceiling came into view, the broken beams, the gap where the sky had turned pale gray. The cottage. She pushed herself up slowly, her back stiff from the uneven floor. The first thing she noticed, Koda. He was in the same place, still near the hearth, still facing it. He hadn't moved much, if at all. Evelyn watched him for a moment. "You stayed there all night?" she asked softly. His ears shifted slightly at the sound of her voice, but he didn't turn. Didn't come to her. That wasn't like him. Evelyn stood carefully, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The cold pressed in again now that the fire was gone. She stepped closer to the hearth, her boots scraping lightly against the stone floor. Koda glanced at her briefly, then back to the same spot. Evelyn followed his gaze. The base of the hearth, a wide stone slab, darker than the rest, stretched across the bottom. It looked solid, old, like it had been placed there long before the rest of the room had settled around it. She crouched beside it, close enough now to see the details she hadn't noticed in the flickering firelight the night before. The surface wasn't rough like the other stones. It was smoother, flatter. And along one edge, there was a faint line, not a crack, not damage, a seam. Evelyn reached out and brushed her fingers across it. Cold. Colder than the rest of the stone. She pulled her hand back slightly. "That's strange," she murmured. Koda shifted his weight. He lowered his nose again, pressing it lightly against the edge of the slab. Then he pawed at it once, just a quick, deliberate motion. The sound echoed softly in the room. Stone against claw. Evelyn watched him. "You've been at this all night," she said. He didn't respond, just stayed there. Waiting. Evelyn straightened slowly. The room looked different in daylight. Less threatening. More honest. The broken table. The scattered debris. The open roof letting in a pale strip of morning sky. Nothing hidden. Except, she glanced back at the hearth. Except that. The day began with small tasks, things that needed doing, whether she understood the house or not. Evelyn stepped outside, the air sharp and clean against her face. The hills stretched out around her, quiet and empty. A thin layer of dew clung to the grass, soaking the edges of her shoes as she walked. She found a shallow stream not far from the cottage. The water moved slowly over smooth stones, clear enough to see the bottom. She knelt carefully, filling an old container she had kept in her bag. The cold bit into her fingers, but she didn't pull away. It was something. Clean, real. When she returned, Koda was waiting at the doorway. He hadn't gone far, hadn't explored, just stayed close. Watching. Inside, Evelyn set the water down and began clearing space. She moved broken wood to one side, gathered loose stones into a pile, shook out her blanket, and folded it neatly near the wall. Each movement was deliberate, measured. Not because she was careful, but because she had learned to be. Koda followed her at first, step for step. But every time she moved too far from the hearth, he stopped, turned back, returned to it, again and again. Evelyn noticed. By midday, it was impossible not to. She stood near the doorway, catching her breath after dragging a heavier piece of wood across the room. The sunlight had shifted, falling directly across the hearth now, illuminating the stone more clearly. Koda sat in front of it. Still, unmoving, like he was guarding something. Evelyn wiped her hands against her coat, then walked back over. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's see." She crouched again. This time she leaned closer, studied the slab carefully. The seam she had seen earlier ran along one side. Thin, precise, too clean to be accidental. She pressed her hand against the surface. Flat. Solid. But something about the way it met the floor felt different. Not fixed. Resting. She pressed down harder. Nothing. She shifted her hand to the opposite edge, pressed again. There. A movement. Small. Barely there. But enough. Evelyn froze. Koda's ears snapped forward instantly. He stood. Every muscle in his body tightening. Evelyn pulled her hand back, looked at the stone, then at Koda. "You felt that too," she whispered. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the slab. Evelyn sat back slowly. Her heartbeat had picked up, though she couldn't say why. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. More like recognition of something she hadn't known was there. She glanced around the room, at the broken furniture, at the empty walls, at the open sky above. Nothing else had changed. Nothing else had moved. Only the hearth. Only that one piece of stone. Evelyn stood, walked to the doorway, looked outside. The hills were the same. Quiet. Still. Nothing watching her. Nothing waiting. She stepped back inside. Closed the door halfway behind her. The room dimmed slightly. The hearth stood in shadow again. Evelyn moved toward it slowly. Not rushing. Not forcing anything. Just returning. Koda stayed close now. Closer than before. His body angled between her and the rest of the room, as if whatever mattered was here, and nowhere else. Evelyn stopped a few feet from the slab. Her hands rested at her sides. She took a breath, let it out slowly. Then she said, almost to herself, "There's something here." Koda didn't react. He didn't need to. They both knew. The cottage had been empty, abandoned, left behind. But this had been placed, intentionally, carefully. And whatever it was, it had been waiting. All this time. Evelyn didn't reach for it again. Not yet. She turned slightly, stepping back toward the fire pit. There were other things to do, things she needed before she started pulling apart what little structure the cottage still had. But as she moved, her eyes kept returning to it. Again and again. The stone at the base of the hearth. The place Koda wouldn't leave. The place that no longer felt like part of the house, but something hidden inside it. Something quiet, something patient, something that had just begun to be seen. Evelyn didn't rush it. The rest of the afternoon passed in small, practical movements. She gathered more wood, cleared a wider space near the hearth, set aside anything that might get in the way if she needed to move quickly. But her attention kept circling back. Like Koda's had. Every few minutes, her eyes would drift to the stone slab at the base of the hearth, the faint seam, the place where it had shifted, just slightly, under her hand. Koda didn't leave it. Not once. He sat beside it now, no longer pacing, no longer uncertain, just present, focused in a way that felt deliberate, as if he understood something she didn't. By the time the light outside began to soften again, Evelyn knew she wasn't going to wait any longer. She stood near the doorway, scanning the ground outside the cottage. There had to be something she could use. The grass had grown thick around the structure, but scattered near the edge of the path were pieces of rusted metal, old fencing, broken tools, things left behind and forgotten like everything else here. She spotted a length of iron half buried in the dirt. It wasn't straight. One end bent slightly, but it would hold. She pulled it free with both hands, the metal scraping against the soil with a dull, dragging sound. It was heavier than it looked, rough against her palms, cold even in the fading warmth of the day. Good enough. She carried it back inside. Koda stood the moment she crossed the threshold. Not startled. Ready. Evelyn closed the door behind her. Not fully, just enough to quiet the wind. The room dimmed again, shadows gathering along the walls as the last light filtered through the broken roof above. She moved toward the hearth. The iron rod in her hand felt solid, real, something she could rely on. She knelt beside the slab. Up close, the seam was clearer now, not wide, not obvious, but unmistakable once you knew it was there. She ran her fingers along the edge one last time, then positioned the rod carefully. The tip slid into the narrow gap with a faint scrape. Koda leaned forward slightly, his body stiff, eyes locked on the movement. Evelyn adjusted her grip. "This might take a minute," she said under her breath. Not to Koda. Not really. Just to fill the silence. She pressed down. Nothing. The rod slipped slightly, scraping against the stone. Evelyn exhaled slowly, shifted her angle, tried again. This time she leaned her weight into it. The metal groaned faintly under the pressure. For a moment, nothing. Then a sound. Low. Grinding. The stone moved. Barely. But enough. Evelyn froze. Her breath caught in her chest. Koda's ears snapped forward. His body tensed, every muscle alert, but he didn't bark, didn't move closer. Just watched. Evelyn swallowed, then pressed again. Harder. The rod dug deeper into the seam. The stone shifted further this time, tilting just enough to break whatever seal had held it in place for years. Dust rose from the edges, drifting into the air. The sound echoed softly in the room. Stone against stone. Old weight being disturbed. Evelyn pulled back slightly, adjusting her grip. "This is it," she whispered. She didn't know why she said it, only that it felt true. She pushed again. The slab lifted slowly, heavy, unwilling, but no longer fixed. With a final shift, it tilted to one side, resting at an angle just wide enough to reveal the space beneath. Darkness, not deep but contained, a hollow. Evelyn set the rod aside carefully. Her hands moved without thinking now. She leaned closer. The air that rose from the opening was cooler, still, like it hadn't moved in a very long time. She reached in. Her fingers brushed against something solid. Wrapped. Rough fabric. She pulled it toward her slowly, carefully. The object emerged from the hollow, heavier than she expected. Wrapped tightly in what looked like old oilcloth, darkened with age but still intact. Evelyn placed it on the stone floor beside her. For a moment, she didn't touch it, just looked. Koda stepped closer now, not crowding, but near enough that she could feel the heat of his body beside her again. His gaze shifted from the opening beneath the hearth to the bundle on the floor. Back and forth. Watching. Evelyn reached out. Her fingers brushed the surface of the cloth. It felt thick. Preserved. Whoever had wrapped this had meant for it to last. She loosened the knot at the top. The fabric resisted at first, stiff from time but slowly gave way. Layer by layer, she peeled it back. Inside, a metal box. Rectangular, dull with age but not rusted through, still sealed. Evelyn exhaled. A sound she hadn't realized she was holding in. Koda lowered his head slightly, sniffing the air. No growl now. No tension. Just focus. Evelyn lifted the box. It was heavier than it looked. Solid. Important. She placed it carefully on the flat surface of the hearth beside her. The fire from earlier had long since faded, but the stone still held a trace of warmth. She rested her hands on either side of the box. Didn't open it yet. Her eyes drifted back to the hollow beneath the slab. There was more. She reached in again. Her fingers found smaller objects this time. Another bundle, then another. She brought them out one by one, placed them beside the box, each wrapped, each preserved, each waiting. The hollow wasn't large, but it was deliberate, built, not accidental. Evelyn sat back slowly. Her heart beat steadily now, not fast, not panicked, but present in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Koda settled beside her, not tense anymore, not watching the slab. His attention had shifted. To her. To what she had uncovered. Evelyn looked down at the items laid out before her. The box. The bundles. The space beneath the hearth that had been hidden until now. She didn't understand what it all meant. Not yet. But she understood one thing clearly. This hadn't been forgotten. It had been left. Intentionally. Carefully. For someone. And somehow, she had been the one to find it. Evelyn rested her hand lightly on the metal box. The surface was cool beneath her fingers. Solid. Real. She glanced at Koda. He met her gaze for a brief moment. Calm now. Steady. As if whatever had drawn his attention to the hearth had done its work. Evelyn looked back at the box. Then, slowly, she reached for the latch. It didn't open right away. The metal had stiffened over time, the hinge holding its place as if it hadn't been touched in decades. Evelyn pressed her thumb against it, testing the give. It resisted. She adjusted her grip. Pressed harder. A small sound broke the silence, sharp, dry. The latch snapped free. Evelyn paused. Not out of fear, but because something about the moment felt final. Like once she opened it, whatever had been waiting all this time would no longer be hidden. Koda shifted beside her. He didn't lean in, didn't pull away. He simply stayed close. Evelyn lifted the lid. The hinges creaked softly. Inside. Darkness at first. Then shapes. Carefully arranged. Undisturbed. Her breath slowed. She reached in. The first thing she touched was a book. Small, leather-bound. The surface was worn, edges softened by time but still intact. She lifted it carefully, brushing away a thin layer of dust that had settled across the top. Beneath it, letters. Folded. Tied together with a thin strip of faded cloth. And to the side, a small pouch. Cloth again. Heavier than it looked. At the bottom of the box, a photograph. Evelyn hesitated before picking it up. She slid it out slowly. The image had faded slightly, but the figures were still clear. A woman stood in front of the same stone cottage, younger than Evelyn, stronger, maybe, but tired in a way that felt familiar. Beside her, a German shepherd. The dog stood tall, close to her leg, its posture steady, alert. Almost the same position Koda held now. Evelyn stared at it. for a long moment. Then she set it carefully on the stone beside her. Koda leaned in slightly, sniffing the air near the photograph. No tension, no warning, just recognition. Evelyn reached for the book again. Opened it slowly. The first page crackled slightly at the fold. The handwriting inside was neat, precise. Each letter carefully formed, as if the writer had taken their time with every word. She read the first line aloud without meaning to. Margaret Doyle. The name settled into the room. Soft. Present. Evelyn turned the page. The entries were dated, years apart, but connected. She read in silence. The words came slowly at first, her eyes adjusting to the faded ink. But then, they began to take shape. Margaret had lived here, alone, after her husband died. A mining accident, the entry said. Collapsed tunnel. No warning, no recovery, just a name listed among others. Evelyn's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the page. She kept reading. The entries didn't rush. They didn't explain everything at once. They moved the way memory does. In fragments. Days, moments, small details. The way the wind sounded at night. The way the house held heat longer near the hearth. The way her dog stayed close when the storms came through the valley. Evelyn glanced at Koda. He had settled beside her now. Fully. His body relaxed for the first time since they arrived, his head resting on the stone, near the place the slab had covered. She looked back at the journal. Margaret wrote about the land, how people had tried to buy it, men from outside, offering money she didn't need, telling her it would be easier to leave. She hadn't. Not once. Page after page, the same quiet refusal. I will not go, one entry read. Evelyn exhaled softly, turned another page. The writing changed slightly near the end. Not weaker, just slower. More space between the lines. Margaret knew she wouldn't stay here forever. That much was clear. She wrote about it directly. Not with fear, not with regret. Just fact. I have no one left to leave this to, one line read. Evelyn's eyes moved more carefully now. Each word carried weight. Margaret described the decision, the way she gathered what little she had, the things that mattered, the things that could help, and how she placed them beneath the hearth. Not to hide them, but to keep them, for someone who might need it more than I did. Evelyn stopped reading. Her gaze drifted to the hollow beneath the slab, then back to the items laid out beside her. The pouch, the letters, the photograph, the journal. She reached for the pouch next, untied the cloth carefully. Inside, money, old bills, coins, worn but preserved, enough to matter, not a fortune, but not nothing. Evelyn stared at it. Her chest rose slowly, fell. Koda shifted slightly, his tail brushing once against the floor. Evelyn set the pouch down, picked up the letters, unfolded one. The paper was thinner than she expected. Fragile, but still readable. They weren't long. Short messages. Fragments of communication. Some addressed to Margaret, some written by her. None of them sent. Evelyn didn't read all of them. Not yet. She placed them back carefully. Her attention returned to the journal. The final entry. It was shorter than the others. Just a few lines. Written clearly, deliberately. This house waits for those who have nowhere else to stand. Evelyn read it once. Then again. The words didn't feel dramatic. They didn't try to be. They just existed. Simple. Certain. She closed the journal slowly, rested her hand on the cover. The room had grown quieter. Or maybe she had. The wind outside had eased. The air inside felt still, held. Koda lifted his head slightly, looked at her. Not the hearth, not the door, just her. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. Her shoulders lowered. Just a little. She looked around the cottage, at the broken table, the worn stone walls, the open space where the roof had given way, then back to the hearth, to what had been hidden beneath it. Waiting. All this time. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Because whatever this place had been before, it wasn't empty anymore. Not now. The cottage felt different the next morning. Not warmer, not safer. At least not in any obvious way. The wind still slipped through the broken sections of the roof. The floor still held the cold from the night. The door still didn't close properly. But something had shifted. Evelyn noticed it the moment she opened her eyes. Koda was no longer at the hearth. He lay beside her. Curled slightly, his head resting near her arm. For the first time since they arrived, he had chosen her over the stone. Evelyn stayed still for a moment, just listening. The quiet here had changed too. It wasn't pressing in on her anymore. It didn't feel like something waiting to see if she would leave. It felt settled. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The items from the box were still laid out near the hearth. She hadn't put them away, hadn't decided what to do with them. The journal sat on top. Closed. Waiting. Evelyn swung her legs over and stood. Her body moved differently now. Still careful, still deliberate, but not as unsure. She walked to the hearth, knelt down, rested her hand on the journal again. The leather felt the same as it had the night before, worn, solid, real. She glanced at the pouch of money, at the letters, at the photograph. All of it still here, still hers to decide. Her first thought was simple: sell it. Take what it was worth. Leave. Find somewhere easier, warmer, closer to people. A place where she wouldn't have to rebuild from stone and silence. The thought stayed for a while, long enough to feel real. She imagined it. A small room somewhere. A bed. A door that locked properly. Koda stretched behind her, letting out a quiet breath. Evelyn looked back at him. He wasn't watching the hearth anymore. Wasn't tense. He simply lay there. Calm. At ease. She turned back. Her gaze moved slowly around the room. The broken table. The scattered boards. The open roof letting in a strip of pale morning light. It wasn't much. It wasn't easy. But it was something she had stepped into. Something she had chosen. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The thought of leaving didn't disappear, but it didn't settle either. It just stayed there, unfinished. Later that morning, she stepped outside. The air was crisp, cooler than the day before, but cleaner. She walked the edge of the property slowly, taking in what she hadn't fully noticed on arrival. The land stretched wider than she expected, uneven, untouched, but not lifeless. Small patches of wild grass. low shrubs. A narrow path that curved out of sight beyond the hill. In the distance, she saw movement. A truck, old, faded paint. It moved slowly along a dirt road further out, then disappeared behind a line of trees. Evelyn watched it go. So there were people. Not many, but enough. Koda walked beside her, his pace steady. He stopped once, lifting his head slightly, watching the same direction. Then he moved on. No tension, no warning, just awareness. By midday, she returned to the cottage. She stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. Looking at it from the outside had changed something. The damage was clearer now. The work ahead, the effort it would take to stay. She stepped in anyway, set her hands on her hips, and looked around. What would it take, she murmured. Not a question she expected an answer to, but one she needed to ask. Koda moved past her, not toward the hearth, toward the center of the room. He circled once, then lay down, right there, as if the space belonged to him now. Evelyn watched him, then nodded slightly. All right. She moved toward the broken table first, lifted one side, tested its weight. Heavy, but not impossible. She dragged it toward the wall, set it upright, then began gathering smaller pieces. Boards, stones, anything that could be used. Her movements grew steadier with each task, more certain. She wasn't fixing everything. Not yet. Just making space. Making sense of what was there. The sun shifted overhead, casting light through the broken roof in different angles. Dust moved in slow patterns through the air, catching in the beams of light before settling again. Time passed. Evelyn didn't count it, didn't need to. She stopped once to drink from the container she had filled the day before. The water was cold, sharp. It grounded her. She looked at her hands. Dirty now, scraped in places. Real. By late afternoon, she stepped back. The room wasn't repaired, not even close, but it was different, clearer, usable. She walked to the hearth again. The items still lay there, unchanged, waiting. Evelyn knelt, picked up the pouch once more, weighed it in her hand. It could change things, make things easier. She knew that. But it didn't answer the question she was standing inside. Stay or go. She placed the pouch back down, picked up the photograph, looked at the woman again. Margaret Doyle, standing in front of this same place, holding her ground. Evelyn studied her expression. Not smiling, not defeated, just certain. Koda stepped closer, sat beside her, not watching the photograph, watching her. Evelyn lowered the photo, met his gaze. You already decided, didn't you? She said quietly. His ears shifted slightly, that was all. But it was enough. Evelyn let out a slow breath. Her shoulders eased, not fully, but enough. She set the photograph back beside the journal. Carefully. Then stood. Turned toward the rest of the cottage. Her voice came out softer this time, but clearer. We'll fix what we can. Koda rose immediately, stepped beside her, close again. The way he had been before everything changed. Evelyn glanced at him, then back at the room, the broken roof, the worn stone, the empty spaces waiting to be filled. It wasn't much, But it wasn't nothing. And for the first time, the idea of staying didn't feel like something she had to survive. It felt like something she might actually choose. Outside, the wind moved gently through the hills. Inside, the cottage stood, still worn, still fragile, but no longer abandoned. And as the light began to fade again, Evelyn Carter didn't think about leaving. Not anymore. The first weeks were quiet. Not easy, never easy, but steady in a way she hadn't expected. Each morning began with the same rhythm: cold air, pale light slipping through the broken roof, the soft sound of Koda shifting before she fully woke. She would sit up slowly, letting her body adjust, her eyes taking in the space around her. The cottage still looked worn, still incomplete, but it no longer felt uncertain. It felt claimed. Koda would stretch beside her, then stand, walking the perimeter of the room like he was checking it again. Not out of tension anymore, out of habit. Then he would return to her. Always. Evelyn moved through her days with purpose now. Not rushed, not forced, just consistent. She reinforced the roof first. It took time, more than she expected. She scavenged what she could: old boards from nearby properties, rusted sheets of metal, anything that could hold against the wind. Some days the work went well, other days it didn't. But she didn't stop. Koda stayed close. He followed her outside, watched as she climbed, waited as she adjusted each piece into place. When she stepped down, he would circle once, checking her, then settle nearby. The hearth remained the center of everything. Not just because it had been before, but because it still was. Evelyn cleaned it carefully. Removed the loose ash, brushed the stone, set the slab back into place, not sealed, not hidden, but resting where it had been. The hollow beneath it remained known now, but no longer secret. The items from the box found a place above the hearth. The journal sat in the center, the photograph beside it, the letters stacked neatly. The pouch, wrapped again, tied the same way she had found it. Not hidden, not displayed, just kept. Weeks turned into something else. Time passed without being measured. The land began to feel familiar. Evelyn learned where the ground softened after rain, where the wind shifted first when a storm approached, where the path curved just enough to reveal the road beyond. One afternoon, she heard the truck again. The same one. It slowed this time, didn't pass. It stopped a short distance from the cottage. Evelyn stood in the doorway, Koda at her side. A man stepped out, middle-aged, work boots, hands marked by years of labor. He didn't approach right away, just stood there, taking in the cottage. Then he nodded once. "You're fixing it up," he said. Evelyn didn't move, trying to. He stepped closer, slowly, careful not to startle Koda. "I'm Leon Harper," he said. "Got a shop down the road." Evelyn nodded. "Evelyn." Leon glanced at the roof, at the patched sections, the effort. "You'll need better materials than that," he said, not unkindly. Evelyn didn't argue. Leon looked at her for a moment longer, then back at the house. "I've got some scrap wood, tools too, if you need." Evelyn hesitated, not out of doubt, out of unfamiliarity. Then she said, "I'd appreciate that." Leon nodded again, didn't linger, just turned, got back into his truck, and drove off. No questions, no expectations, just presence. That was how it began. Not all at once, not with noise or attention, but with small things. A stack of wood left by the road, a set of tools placed near the doorway, a quiet acknowledgement from people who had seen the house empty long enough to know what it meant to see it lived in again. Evelyn accepted what came. Nothing more. Nothing less. Inside, the cottage changed. The roof held. The walls stayed firm. The space became something she could move through without thinking about what might fall or shift beneath her. She added a small table, repaired one of the chairs, set her belongings in places that made sense. Not much, but enough. Koda changed too. The tension that had followed him from the first night was gone. He no longer watched the hearth, no longer paced. He slept deeply now, sometimes in the center of the room, sometimes near the door, but often right beside her, as if the work had been done, as if whatever had needed to be found had been found. One evening, months later, Evelyn sat by the hearth. A fire burned low. Steady. The room held warmth now. Real warmth. The kind that stayed. She reached for the journal, opened it again. Not to search, just to read. The pages felt familiar now. Margaret's handwriting, her words, her presence in the space. Evelyn turned to the final entry. Read it again. This house waits for those who have nowhere else to stand. She closed the book slowly. Her fingers rested on the cover for a moment. Then she set it back in its place. Koda shifted beside her, resting his head lightly against her leg. Evelyn looked down at him. Her hand moved to his back. Steady. Warm. She looked around the room. The walls. The roof. The hearth. All of it. Still simple. Still quiet. But no longer empty. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the house she had left behind, the closed door, the silence that had followed. She waited for something, a pull, a regret, but it didn't come. Not the way she expected. Instead, there was just distance, like looking at something far away that no longer had the power to reach you. Evelyn leaned back slightly. The firelight moved across the stone, casting soft shadows that shifted with each small crackle of wood. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. Because what she had found beneath the hearth, it hadn't been just money or a journal, or the story of someone who had lived here before. It had been something quieter, something steadier, a place that had held its ground, a place that hadn't asked her to be anything other than what she already was. Evelyn rested her hand more firmly on Koda's back. He didn't move, just stayed there, present. The fire burned low. The night settled in around the cottage. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn Carter didn't feel like she was passing through. She felt like she had arrived. And that was enough. The fire had burned down to a quiet glow, just enough to soften the edges of the room. Koda didn't move, his breathing slow, steady against her leg. For a long time, she just sat there, listening, not to anything outside, but to the kind of stillness that used to scare her. Back then, silence meant something was missing. Now, it felt full. Her eyes drifted to the hearth, to the stone that had once hidden everything. She thought about how easily she could have walked past it, how close she had been to leaving this place behind before ever knowing what waited underneath.
But she hadn't found it. Koda had. He was the one who stopped, the one who refused to let it be just another empty room, the one who stayed when nothing else made sense. Evelyn reached down, the fingers resting in the thick fur and his neck. "You knew," he said softly. Koda didn't lift his head. He didn't need to. Some things didn't ask to be explained. She looked around again, and bathrobe, the one stone, the quiet shape of the life rebuilt one small piece at a time. None of it was what she had lost, but none of it asked her to be someone else either. And maybe that was the part she hadn't understood before, that starting over didn't mean realizing what was taken. It meant standing still long enough for something else to find you. The fire shifted, a soft breath in the quiet. Evelyn leaned back, her hands still resting on Koda, and in that moment she wondered how many things in her life had been waiting just patiently for her to stop walking past them.